What if I told you that an entire battalion, hundreds of trained soldiers, marched into the mist of war one morning and were never seen again? No bodies, no graves, not a single scrap of evidence to mark their fate. It sounds like a ghost story whispered around a campfire, but this is one of history's strangest and most unsettling mysteries. The story begins in the chaos of a world at war. A battalion of proud young men had been ordered forward, their boots striking the ground in rhythm, rifles gleaming under a pale sky. To the villagers watching from the hills, they looked unstoppable, an iron wall of men marching into destiny. Yet as the soldiers advanced into the valley, the morning fog began to roll in, thick and heavy, swallowing the landscape like a curtain being drawn across the stage. The villagers kept watching, expecting to see them emerge on the far side, banners fluttering proudly. But they never did. The fog closed, the sound of boots faded, silence, and then nothing. At first, no one panicked. War is full of delays and uncertainties. Commanders assumed the battalion had engaged the enemy, or perhaps taken an alternate route. But when hours turned to days, unease set in. Scouts were sent out, combing the forests, the fields, the trenches. They expected to find signs of a battle, shell casings, broken rifles, torn uniforms, blood in the mud. Yet the land lay eerily undisturbed. Not a bullet hole, not a footprint, not even a dropped helmet. It was as though the earth itself had devoured them whole. The families of the soldiers begged for answers. Letters were sent to the military headquarters, demanding the truth. But the official response was cold and strangely vague. The battalion is unaccounted for. No explanations, no closure, just the void of not knowing. The silence was louder than gunfire. In the ranks, whispers spread like wildfire. Some soldiers swore that the fog that morning hadn't been natural. They claimed it moved with purpose, curling and shifting as though alive. Others whispered of an ambush so brutal that nothing remained, not even the dead. And then came the most unsettling rumor of all, that the battalion hadn't been killed, but drawn into a place beyond this world. There were stories of men who on quiet nights claimed to see ghostly figures marching endlessly through the misty valleys, pale shapes, rifles on their shoulders, eyes empty, boots striking ground that made no sound. A haunting army, trapped in an eternal march, never reaching home. The sightings were always fleeting, always at the edge of vision, but they were enough to keep the legend alive. Years passed, the world moved on, wars ended, and new ones began. The missing battalion became a tale for firesides and barracks, a cautionary ghost story about the price of war. But decades later, buried deep in the archives, a forgotten report was uncovered, one that had been locked away, hidden from public eyes. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but the words were still legible. The officer who had written it described the events with a nervous hand. He claimed to have watched the battalion that morning, as they marched into the valley. He described the fog, but not as ordinary mist. It shimmered, he wrote, as if laced with silver light. It rippled, like water disturbed by unseen hands. He swore he heard the soldiers' footsteps echoing not forward but downward, like boots striking a hollow surface, as though the men were descending into a cavern beneath the earth. He wrote of shouting, of the cries of confusion, and then suddenly silence. When the fog cleared, the valley was empty. Why was this report buried? Some believe the military suppressed it to avoid panic, unwilling to admit that something unexplainable had taken place. Others suggest it brushed too close to experiments or weapons no one dared reveal. And still others whisper of things that cannot be understood with science at all. That those men had marched through a door that was never meant to be opened. Skeptics have tried to explain it away. Perhaps the battalion was annihilated by artillery so completely that no trace remained. Perhaps they were captured, erased in secret by the enemy, but no evidence has ever supported those claims. The battalion's fate remains sealed in shadows. What lingers is the mystery, the eerie silence where hundreds of voices should have been. Families never got closure, commanders never got answers, and history was left with a gaping hole where truth should have been. So the story endures, carried in hushed tones, like the echo of distant boots in the fog. Some say, on moonlit nights, if you stand in that valley long enough, you can still hear them, an endless march of unseen soldiers waiting for orders that will never come. And perhaps that is the cruelest part of all. Not that they vanished, but that they were forgotten.